line 791 with interea. So interea here means meanwhile. So meanwhile, and then the subject is rex, the king. And he is the king of omnipotentis Olympi. So that's a genitive phrase. So the king of all-powerful Olympus, or almighty Olympus. And the main verb is ad loquitur. So remember, loqui is a deponent verb, meaning to speak. And ad loquor is to speak to someone. So he speaks to or addresses, and the object is eunonem, which is the accusative of Juno. So this is Jupiter speaking to his wife Juno. So meanwhile, the king of almighty Olympus addresses Juno, and Juno is described as tuentem, so that's an accusative present participle agreeing with eunonem. So Juno is watching, or you could say as she watches, the pugnas, that's the object of tuentem, the pugnas, the fights or combats, from or down from, plus ablative, down from a golden cloud, a fulva nube. So that's our ablative phrase following day, fulva nube. So fulvus is an adjective meaning sort of yellow or blonde or golden, and then nube is cloud. And then we go into direct speech, and Jupiter says, quae iam, what now will be, erit, the end, finis, and then we have this vocative conjunx, meaning wife. So what now will be the end, wife? Or what will be the end now, wife? In other words, Jupiter is saying, when, Juno, are you going to stop resisting fate? When are you going to stop supporting Turnus? When you know that he has to lose the war, he is fated to lose the war, and Aeneas is fated to win. And he then says, quid, meaning what restat, what remains at last, denique, or what is left for you at the last. The idea here is what tactic is left for you to try. Right? You've tried lots of tactics to help Turnus win, and they've all failed. So what are you going to do now? That's his question. And then in the next line, we have to go to skis ipsa. Right? Skis means you know. So it's from skio skire, to know, and it's the second person singular present tense. You know, and ipsa is reinforcing that. So you yourself, and it's feminine because the you being referred to is Juno. You yourself know. And et, you admit, fateris, that you know, scire. So this word fateor, fateri, it's a deponent verb meaning to admit, and then it introduces accusative and infinitive. So technically the Latin should have te here, you admit that you, and then the infinitive is scire, you admit that you know. And then we go into another accusative and infinitive. So you know, and you admit that you know, that Aeneas, he's our accusative, that Aeneas, as an indigatem. Now an indigatem, it's a difficult word to translate. It means something like a native hero of the land. The idea is that Aeneas will become a kind of local Italian god when he dies. So you yourself know, and you admit that you know, that Aeneas, as an indigatem, as a native hero of the land, literally, that Aeneas is owed to heaven, deberi kailo, is owed for or destined for heaven, and is tolli, is being raised, so that's a present passive infinitive from tollo, to lift up, and that Aeneas is being raised to the stars, ad ad sidera, to the stars, by fate, fatis. Okay, so this phrase is governed by an accusative and infinitive construction. The accusative is Aeneas, and indicatum is linked to that. And then our two infinitives are deberi and tolli. So you know that Aeneas is owed to heaven and is being lifted up to the stars. So it's that accusative ainean and the two infinitives deberi and tolli, which form the kind of structure of the sentence, the kind of scaffolding of the sentence. And Jupiter then asks, quid struis, which literally means, what are you constructing? Or, in other words, what are you planning? Or, that's out, with what hope? So, qua spe is ablative. With what hope do you remain, haires? And haires is where we get the word adhesive from in English, like glue. In other words, it's like you're staying, but it's stronger than manere. It's like to cling somewhere. With what hope do you cling or remain? You could, in my translation, I said remain fixed because it's got that idea of really clinging on. With what hope do you remain fixed in the gelidis nubibus? Right? Gelidus means icy or frosty, and nubibus are clouds. So gelidis in nubibus means in the icy clouds. In other words, what are you planning? Right? Juno is sitting there or standing there in the sky among the icy clouds, looking down at the battle, and she seems to be plotting something. And Jupiter is basically saying, give up. Right? You need to accept that Aeneas is going to win and Turnus is going to lose. Then the clue to the next sentence is decuit. Now, decuit means was it right? Was it proper? This is where the English word decorous comes from. Decorous. So, was it right? And then we go into another accusative and infinitive, another indirect statement. Was it right for a god, divum, that's like deum, was it right for a god to be violated or to be dishonored, violari, that's a present passive infinitive, to be dishonored, by a mortali vulnere, by a mortal wound? And the meaning of mortali here is from a mortal. Right? So was it right for a god to be dishonored by a wound, vulnere, dealt by a mortal, mortali, or a wound that was struck or given by a mortal? Okay. And if you're wondering, the N at the end of mortali, in prose that would be ne, mortali ne, right? And the N is there just to make this sentence a question. Virgil has taken the has taken the E away at the end. He's removed the E from mortali ne, just to make the word fit into the rhythm of the line. Okay, so it would be mortali ne decuit violari vulnere divum. So was it right for a god to be dishonored by a wound from a mortal? And this is a reference to the fact that Aeneas is becoming a god or about to become a god, and so therefore the Trojans, and particularly Turnus, should not be allowed to wound him. And then we have out, meaning or, and then we have to imagine decuit again. Or was it right that the sword, ensem, so we're going into another accusative and infinitive with ensem as our accusative, or that the sword, and the sword is described as ereptum, so literally the having been taken away sword. Okay, so, or was it right that the sword that had been taken away, that's ereptum, should be given back, reddis, that's a present passive infinitive, should be given back to Turnus, turno, dative case, and that strength, vim, should grow, crescere, for the having been conquered people, for the victis, for those who have been vincere, those who have been conquered. Okay, so the idea of this sentence is, Turnus's sword had been taken away, the Italians had basically been conquered, and that should have been the end of the war. But Juno has kept it going by giving Turnus' sword back and giving strength to the victis, the conquered, i.e. the Italians. And now we can also add in this phrase in brackets here, quid enim sine te iuturna valeret. So enim means for, quid means what, valeret means could, really. It's just really like posset, really. It's like using possum. For what could Juturna do? So you have to imagine facere or something. What could Juturna do sine te, without you? So Jupiter is basically saying, yes, Juturna technically gave the sword back to Juno, but, Juturna is not a very powerful goddess. She would never have been able to do it without Juno's help. So Jupiter is putting the blame for all this on Juno. Okay, and then we go on to the next page here, and Jupiter says "de sine iam tandem." So "de sine" is an imperative from "de sine," which just means to stop. So Jupiter says "stop" or "cease." Now, iam, at last, tandem. After all this time, just stop, just give up, just cease. And que, be moved. So inflectere is a passive infinitive. So he's saying be turned, be moved by nostris precibus, by my prayers or requests or entreaties. Right? Nostris literally means our, but in this context, Jupiter means his own, right? My. So be moved by my entreaties. Then ne introduces a negative purpose clause, so that something might not happen. Right? So be moved by my entreaties, so that your tantus dolor, your great grief, may not aedit te. Now, aedit means to sort of eat up or consume, and the object is te. So ne, so that your tantus dolor, your great grief, would not, that's the negative bit of ne, would not consume you, aedit te. Tacitam is agreeing with te, literally being silent or in your silence. And then we have to imagine ne again, so that curai tristes, sad cares, sad anxieties, ex tuo dulci ore, out of, that's ex, tuo, that's your, dulci, sweet, and ore is mouth, so out of your sweet mouth, or coming out of your sweet mouth, or you could say coming from your sweet lips. May not, that's ne again, may not recursent, that means sort of keep visiting. Mihi, so keep coming back to me, often, saipe. Okay, and I've added the word often to the translation here. I've put, yes, I've added often after visiting me. So that sad anxieties coming from your sweet lips may not keep visiting me often. And then he says, the end is reached. Literally, ventum est. There has been a coming ad supremum, to the end. There has been a coming to the end. In other words, this is the end of the line. There's no more twists and turns after this. Now Turnus has to die, Aeneas has to win. The end is reached. And then he says, potuisti, that's the second person singular perfect from possum. You have been able to agitare Trojanos, to drive or agitate the Trojans on lands, terris, or on waves, undis. In other words, on land or sea, or over lands or waves. Okay. And then in the next phrase, we have to supply potuisti again. You have been able to accendere, to light or kindle, infandum bellum, monstrous war. You have been able to deformare domum, to deform their home. Right now, this domum is the home of Latinus, but it's being used to refer to all of the Italians together, right? To deform their home, Latinus's home, and by extension, the homes of all the other Italians as well. So, in other words, Jupiter is saying, you've been so keen to punish the Trojans that you've actually ended up punishing the Italians as well. And you've been able to miscere, to mix hymenaios, wedding songs, nuptial songs, right? Songs that are sung at weddings, with mourning, with grief. And this is perhaps a reference to the fact that there was supposed to be this happy wedding between Aeneas and Lavinia, but by helping Turnus, Juno has just delayed that wedding for a long time, and that's caused lots of pain and suffering. And then the last thing Jupiter says is veto. He says, I forbid you, right? We can imagine te, I forbid you to try temptare ulterius any more or further. In other words, you need to stop trying to help Turnus. Right? It's over. And then this last phrase describing Jupiter's speech, sic Jupiter orsus. So orsus is short for orsus est, which means basically spoke. So thus Jupiter spoke.